The twin suns were setting over the red dunes of outpost K9. The air shimmered with heat, and the wind carried the dry sound of sand scraping against metal walls. Evan, a young mechanic with tired eyes and grease-stained hands, stood under the half-broken roof of his workshop. He was fixing a cargo shuttle, one of the many ships that came to this forgotten outpost. Life here was simple but lonely, just work, food, and long silences. He liked it that way, or at least he told himself so. A loud clang came from behind one of the fuel tanks. Evan frowned, putting down his wrench. He looked around, thinking it might be one of the desert lizards that liked to sneak into his workshop. But this sound was heavier, like something or someone had fallen. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked slowly toward the noise. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing softly between the metal walls. No answer, only the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the roof. He took another step, his boots crunching against the dusty floor. Then from behind a pile of scrap parts a small shape moved. Evan froze, his hand reaching for the small plasma torch on his belt. A shadow stumbled into the light, and what he saw made his breath catch. It was a girl, or at least, she looked like one. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her eyes, large and silver, shimmered like liquid metal. She was wearing a torn cloak, and her hands shook as she tried to steady herself. Evan stared, unable to speak for a moment. The alien girl looked up at him, fear shining in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. Hide me from my father." Evan blinked, unsure if he had heard right. Hide her from her father? He opened his mouth to ask, but before he could speak, she swayed on her feet and fell forward. He caught her just before she hit the ground, her body surprisingly light. Her skin felt cold, almost like touching ice. Hey, stay awake," Evan said, his voice low and careful, but her eyes had closed, and she was breathing fast, shallow breaths. He looked toward the open door of his workshop. The wind howled outside, carrying a faint rumble, the sound of engines. Someone was coming. Evan's heart began to race. He didn't know who she was or what danger followed her, but something inside told him that if he handed her over, it would be the wrong choice. He lifted her into his arms and carried her behind a pile of storage crates. He covered her with an old gray blanket, her silver hair disappearing under the rough fabric. The rumble grew louder, then stopped a few seconds later. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the outpost yard. Evan peeked through a crack in the wall. 3 figures were walking toward his workshop. They were tall, wearing black armor that reflected the twin suns' fading light. At the front was one who moved with authority, an alien male, his armor shining gold at the edges. His eyes glowed faintly red, his expression sharp and cold. They entered the workshop without knocking. Evan quickly pretended to be busy, turning a wrench over a half-finished engine. The leader spoke, his voice deep and powerful. "Human," he said, "we're looking for someone. A girl with markings on her neck. Have you seen her?" Evan looked up, forcing himself to appear calm. He shook his head slowly. "No, haven't seen anyone today. Just ships and sand." The alien stepped closer, his eyes scanning every shadow. He stopped near the pile of crates where the girl was hidden. Evan's heart pounded so hard he thought they might hear it. The alien narrowed his eyes. "If you are lying," he said softly, "your life will end before you can take another breath." Evan didn't move, didn't blink. After a tense moment, the alien turned and gave a short signal to his guards. They left as quickly as they came, their engines roaring into the distance. Evan waited until the sound faded away before letting out a long breath. He turned to the crates and pulled back the blanket. The girl was still unconscious, her silver hair shining faintly in the dim light. Evan sat beside her, confusion filling his mind. Who was she? And why was she running from her own father? And what could be so dangerous that armored soldiers were hunting her across the desert? He didn't know the answers yet, but he did know one thing. Whatever secret she carried, it was big. He looked at her again, her breathing soft and steady now. Somewhere far in the desert, thunder rumbled again, but Evan knew it wasn't a storm. It was the sound of ships and in trouble, coming closer. The night on outpost K9 was cold and quiet. The stars above the red desert looked sharp and endless. Inside the small workshop, only the weak hum of a power cell broke the silence. Evan sat beside the alien girl, his mind racing with questions. He had never seen anyone like her before. Not in all his years fixing ships and engines. She looked peaceful now, but her words from earlier still echoed in his head. "Hide me from my father." He studied her strange features under the flickering light. Her blue skin shimmered softly like moonlight. Small lines ran across her neck, glowing faintly, pulsing like veins of light. Evan didn't know if they were natural or some kind of implant. He reached out carefully and touched the metal bracelet on her wrist. It looked old, alien, covered with tiny markings he couldn't read. As soon as his fingers brushed it, the bracelet flashed once. Evan jumped back, his heart skipping. Then it went dark again. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered, rubbing his hand. Suddenly the girl moved. Her eyes opened, bright and silver like liquid mirrors. She looked around, panic flashing across her face. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Evan raised his hand slowly, trying to calm her. "You're safe. At least for now," he said. "You were hurt, and I hid you when some men came looking." The girl sat up, her breathing fast. "You hid me?" she said, her voice full of disbelief. "Why?" Evan shrugged. "Didn't seem right to hand you over to those armored thugs." Her eyes softened for a moment, then filled with fear again. "They're not just soldiers," she said quietly. "They are hunters. Sent by my father." Evan frowned. "Your father? Why would he send hunters after his own daughter?" She looked down, clutching the blanket close to her chest. "Because I took something from him," she whispered. "Something important." Before Evan could ask more, a soft beep came from outside. He turned toward the door and froze. Red lights flashed briefly across the sand, scanning lights. "They're back," he whispered. The girl's eyes widened. "They can track energy signatures. We have to hide." Evan grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back of the workshop. He lifted a heavy metal grate, revealing a maintenance tunnel beneath. "Down there," he said. She hesitated, but the lights were getting closer. So she climbed down first. Evan followed, closing the grate above them, sealing it shut. The tunnel was narrow and smelled of rust and dust. The girl's breathing echoed softly, mixed with Evan's from above. Heavy boots thudded against the floor. Voices spoke in a strange, deep language. The soldiers were inside the workshop again. Evan could see their shadows through cracks in the metal. One of them stopped right above where they hid. The girl gripped Evan's arm tightly. Her body shaking, he didn't dare move or breathe. The guard stood there for what felt like forever, then walked away. Moments later, they heard the sound of engines leaving. Only then did Evan exhale, his heart pounding in his chest. After a long silence, the girl whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." Evan turned to her, frowning. "What, saved you?" She nodded slowly. "You don't understand what you've done." He sighed, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Well, it's a little late for that now," he said, "so maybe you should start explaining." The girl looked away, her expression filled with guilt. "My name is Lyra," she said softly. "I am the daughter of Lord Kale, ruler of the Varan Empire." Evan blinked. He had heard that name before. The Varan were one of the most feared alien empires in the sector. They controlled half the outer colonies through war and fear. And their leader, Lord Kale, was known as the Warlord of Stars. Evan swallowed hard. "So you're telling me I just hid the daughter of the most powerful man in the galaxy?" Lyra nodded, her voice small. "And now he will come for both of us." Evan leaned back against the cold tunnel wall. He laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "Well, that's just perfect," he muttered. Lyra looked at him with sad eyes. "I didn't want this," she said, "but I had no choice. He wants to use something that could destroy everything, even your world." Evan stared at her, confused and alarmed. "What kind of thing?" he asked. Lyra looked at the small metallic bag she held tightly. "You'll find out soon," she whispered. Her fingers glowed faintly as she touched it, and it made a low humming sound. Evan could only stare, wondering what kind of storm he had just stepped into. Above them, the wind howled again. The hunters might have left for now, but both of them knew they would return, and next time there would be no hiding. In the dark tunnel beneath the outpost, a human and an alien girl sat side by side. Two strangers bound by fate, waiting for whatever would come next. The tunnel air was cold and heavy. Evan sat in silence, watching the strange bag in Lyra's hands. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, changing color with every small movement. She held it close, like something precious or dangerous. Evan could hear the faint hum coming from it, steady and alive. He had worked with all kinds of alien tech before, but he had never seen anything like that bag. Lyra looked pale, her silver eyes dim in the weak light. She was shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Evan felt sorry for her, but also uneasy. He knew the soldiers might return any moment, and he didn't even know what he was protecting. He cleared his throat and whispered, "What's in that bag?" Lyra looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she said quietly, "It's something my father would kill entire worlds to get back." Evan blinked. "Kill worlds?" he repeated. Lyra nodded slowly. "It doesn't belong to him, and it doesn't belong to me either. It's something else." Before Evan could speak again, the bag vibrated softly. The metal surface rippled, and a faint light began to shine from within. Lyra gasped and tried to hold it tighter, but the bag slipped from her hands and floated in midair. Evan stared, wide-eyed. It opened itself. The metal layers unfolding like petals. Inside was a glowing orb, round, smooth and alive with soft blue light. The air around it seemed to hum. The light grew brighter until the tunnel was filled with pale glow. Evan covered his eyes. "What is that thing?" he asked. Lyra didn't answer. She was staring at the orb like someone staring at an old memory. "It's called a core of life," she whispered. "It's not a weapon, but it can change everything." Evan frowned. "What do you mean?" Lyra hesitated, then said, "My father discovered it long ago. It came from a world far beyond our maps, a world that vanished before time was written." The orb pulsed softly. Symbols appeared in the air, bright shapes that looked like stars and circles. Evan reached out, but Lyra caught his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't touch it," she said quickly. "It can sense thought and emotion. It reacts to living minds." Evan lowered his hand slowly. The light danced across his face. He could feel a faint vibration in his chest, like his own heartbeat was echoing with the orb's rhythm. Lyra sighed. "My father wants to use this to rule every species. He believes the core can control life itself. He says it can create or destroy entire civilizations." Evan stared at her. "And you stole it from him?" Lyra nodded, her voice quiet. "I couldn't let him have it. He sees it as a tool of power. But I saw something else. A message hidden inside." Evan tilted his head. "A message?" She nodded. "Yes, I think it's trying to tell us something. Something about peace, about connection between worlds." Evan rubbed his forehead. "Peace? That doesn't sound like something a warlord would care about." Lyra gave a small, sad smile. "My father never listens, he only takes." The orb dimmed slowly. Its light faded until it was no brighter than a candle. Then it floated back into the bag on its own. The metal petals closed around it again. Sealing it tight, Evan exhaled slowly. His hands trembled a little. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't just technology, and it felt alive. He had fixed engines, droids, and even alien weapons. But nothing had ever felt like this. Lyra leaned back against the tunnel wall, her voice weak but steady. "They will track it soon," she said. "The core releases energy signals. They can sense it from light years away." Evan looked up, worry in his eyes. "Then we can't stay here," he said. Lyra nodded. "There's a ship hidden not far from here. I used it to escape before they hit my cruiser. We can reach it before sunrise if we move now." Evan hesitated. He had a quiet life before all this. No war, no aliens, no glowing orbs, just engines and silence. But now that seemed like another lifetime. He looked at Lyra, tired, scared, but determined. He sighed and said, "All right, let's get out of this hole." Lyra smiled faintly. "Thank you, human," she whispered. "My name's Evan," he said softly. She nodded, then "Thank you, Evan." As they climbed out of the tunnel, the cold night wind hit their faces. The stars above looked closer than ever. Evan turned to look one last time at the workshop. His old life buried in the dust below. He didn't know where this road would lead, but something inside told him it was already too late to turn back. Because now he was part of something far bigger than himself. And somewhere in the distance, the hum of alien engines echoed once again. The desert wind blew cold as Evan and Lyra walked under the endless night sky. The red dunes stretched in all directions, glowing faintly under twin moons. Their footprints trailed behind them, soon erased by the wind. Evan carried a small pack on his back filled with tools, food, and a few spare power cells. Lyra walked beside him, clutching the strange metallic bag close to her chest. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence between them was heavy, filled with thoughts neither dared to say aloud. Evan finally broke the quiet. "So," he said softly, "you said that thing, the core, came from another world?" Lyra nodded without looking up. "Yes, from a place lost long before my father's empire existed." She glanced at the horizon, her silver eyes catching the moonlight. "It was found buried inside an asteroid. Deep within the void between galaxies." Evan raised an eyebrow. "And your father just kept it?" Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. "He called it a gift from the stars, but it wasn't a gift," she said. "It was a warning." Evan stopped walking. "A warning?" Lyra turned to face him, her hair blowing in the cold wind. "The core contains a memory," she said. "It shows what happened to the ones who made it. The ones who came before us all." Evan frowned. "You mean another species?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, ancient ones who mastered life energy. They could shape matter, heal planets, or destroy them, but they vanished. Their whole civilization gone. The core remembers it all." Evan looked at her, trying to understand. "So your father wants to use it to do what they did?" Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "He wants to finish what they started." "He believes he can become a god?" Evan shook his head slowly. "That's insane," he said. Lyra gave a small, sad smile. "Yes, but my father has always believed power makes him right." The wind picked up again. Blowing sand around them, Evan looked at the glowing horizon. "So why did you take it?" he asked. Lyra sighed. "When I touched it for the first time, it showed me something," she said softly. "It showed me my world burning, cities falling, planets breaking apart. It showed me the cost of my father's dream." Her voice trembled slightly. "I couldn't let that future happen." Evan walked beside her in silence. He could see the pain in her eyes. This wasn't just about rebellion or politics, it was about survival. She wasn't just running from her father. She was running from the end of everything she knew. After a while, Lyra stopped and crouched down behind a rock. "There," she whispered, pointing ahead in the distance. Hidden behind a dune, a small ship rested in the sand. Its hull was sleek and silver, half buried but still glowing faintly. "That's my vessel," she said. "I crashed it when I escaped the Imperial fleet." Evan nodded. "Let's hope it still flies." They moved quickly, keeping low. Evan climbed into the cockpit and began inspecting the systems. The screens flickered weakly, power cells drained almost empty. He opened a panel and started reconnecting circuits with his tools. Lyra stood at the door, scanning the sky nervously. "The hunters will come again," she said. "They can track the core's energy." Even through the sand, Evan grunted as he worked. "Then I'll make this thing fly before they do." Minutes passed. Sparks flew from the wires as Evan rerouted power from an emergency battery. The engines coughed once, then hummed to life. He smiled, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "She's breathing again," he said. Lyra gave a small nod, relief showing in her eyes. But before they could board, a low rumble echoed across the desert. Evan froze. Lyra's face turned pale. "They've found us," she whispered in the distance. 3 dark ships appeared over the dunes. Their engines roared like thunder. Lights scanning the ground, Evan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the ship's ramp. "Get inside," he shouted. Lyra hesitated, looking back at the approaching lights. "I can't let them capture the core," she said. "They'll kill you too if you try to help me." Evan met her eyes. "I'm already in it," he said simply. "Now move." They ran inside as laser fire struck the sand behind them. Evan jumped into the pilot's seat. Lyra fastened herself beside him, holding the bag tightly. The ship shook violently as the engines roared. Sand exploded around them as they lifted off. The horizon glowed with red light from the enemy's guns. Lyra looked out the window, her voice barely a whisper. "They'll never stop," she said. Evan tightened his grip on the controls. "Then we won't stop either," he said. The ship shot upward into the dark sky, fire and wind swirling behind them. As the outpost disappeared below, Lyra closed her eyes. For a moment she felt the core's pulse inside the bag. It was glowing again, brighter than before and deep in her mind. A faint voice whispered, not her father's, but something older, something watching from beyond the stars. Evan glanced at her, seeing her distant expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. Lyra opened her eyes slowly. "It's starting," she whispered. And outside among the stars a storm of light began to form. The ship tore through the black sky, leaving a trail of blue fire behind. Evan's hands gripped the controls tightly. His eyes locked on the flashing radar. Lyra sat beside him, breathing fast, holding the metallic bag close to her chest outside. 3 enemy ships followed like shadows in the night. Their engines burned bright, cutting through the darkness like hungry predators. The hum of energy weapons echoed through the cockpit walls. Every few seconds, a red beam of plasma sliced through the air. Missing them by inches, Evan tilted the ship sharply. Diving low through the clouds, the metal hull rattled. Alarms flashing red across the dashboard. "Hold on," he shouted. Lyra clutched the seat, her silver eyes wide with fear. The ship rolled and twisted, slipping between mountain peaks of glowing stone. Bolts of blue lightning arched across the sky, lighting up the desert below. But the enemy ships were faster. They followed with perfect precision, closing in with each second. Lyra turned toward Evan, her voice trembling. "They'll destroy us if they hit the engines." Evan gritted his teeth. "Then they'd better not hit them," he said. Twisting the controls again, he pushed the ship lower, skimming the dunes so close that sand exploded behind them. The engines screamed in protest, the hull glowing hot. One plasma bolt struck the left wing. Sparks flew across the cabin, filling the air with smoke. Lyra gasped. "They've locked on again." Evan slammed his hand on the console, switching off the main thrusters. The ship dropped suddenly, falling into a canyon. The enemy ships overshot, flying right past them for a few seconds. There was silence except for the crackle of static. Lyra looked around in disbelief. "Did we lose them?" she asked. Evan gave a small grin. "Maybe," he said, "but not for long." He powered the engines back up, the sound echoing through the narrow canyon. The walls glowed red under the heat, and sand swirled like smoke. Lyra stared out the window, her hands trembling slightly. "Why are you helping me, Evan?" she asked softly. "You don't even know me." Evan kept his eyes on the radar. "Because you looked scared," he said quietly. "And because I've seen enough of powerful people doing terrible things." Lyra turned away, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father doesn't see fear or mercy, only control." Evan glanced at her. "Well, then maybe it's time someone stood up to him," he said. Lyra smiled faintly. "You don't know what you're saying. Human, he commands worlds." Evan shrugged. "Yeah, but everyone bleeds." The radar beeped again. 3 dots reappeared, moving fast. "They're back," Evan muttered. The enemy ships dropped into the canyon behind them. Bright beams of light cut through the dust, illuminating the walls like fire. Lyra closed her eyes, clutching the core's bag. The hum inside it grew louder. Suddenly, the entire cockpit glowed blue. Evan looked down, startled. "Lyra, what's happening?" She gasped. "The core, it's reacting to danger. It's protecting us." A sudden pulse burst from the bag. The wave of blue light spread across the sky. The canyon wall shook, sending rocks tumbling down. The enemy ships wobbled, their systems flashing and failing. Evan felt the controls vibrate, but his ship stayed stable. The pulse ended as quickly as it started. When the light faded, only silence remained. The radar was empty. Lyra opened her eyes slowly, her face pale. "What was that?" Evan asked. Lyra shook her head. "I don't know. It's never done that before." Evan leaned back in his seat, catching his breath. The stars shimmered faintly through the cracked glass. "Well," he said, "whatever it was, it saved us." Lyra looked down at the bag, her expression filled with both awe and fear. "The core isn't just a weapon," she whispered. "It's alive, it feels." "It decides," Evan raised an eyebrow. "Decides what?" Lyra looked up at him, her voice shaking. "Who deserves to live?" The words hung heavy in the air. Evan turned back to the stars. He didn't like the sound of that. He had always believed machines should obey, not choose. But the core wasn't a machine. Not anymore. As they flew farther from the canyon, the horizon began to glow faintly. A city of light shimmered in the distance, tall towers rising from the sand. Lyra pointed at it. "That's Rhaenyra Station," she said. "It's neutral territory. No Empire patrols there. If we reach it, we can hide." Evan nodded, adjusting their course. "Then let's hope your father doesn't own the sky too," he said. The engines roared again. Stars passed by like streaks of silver. Lyra sat back, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. But deep inside, she could still hear the core's pulse. It was calling to something or someone across the galaxy. Evan noticed her distant look. "You okay?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled. "But I think the core just told him where we are. Outside, behind them in the darkness, the stars began to shift and glow. And far away, a fleet of golden ships awakened, their engines lighting up like suns, and at the center of it all, a voice spoke through the static. "Find my daughter," it said coldly, "and bring me the human alive." The ship sliced through the thin atmosphere of Rhaenyra Station's orbit. Evan's hands were tight on the controls, eyes flicking between warning lights and the radar. The system was unstable, engines overheating from the last chase. Lyra sat beside him, pale and silent, her hands gripping the metallic bag tightly. Outside the window, the space around them glowed with dust and scattered lights. Rhaenyra Station floated ahead like a giant silver wheel turning in the void. Its docking rings shimmered under the distant sun, but something felt wrong. Evan adjusted the frequency. "Rhaenyra Control. This is civilian ship Echo 7 requesting permission to dock." Static answered him. Then a cold robotic voice came through. "Access denied. Airspace restricted by order of the Varan Empire." Lyra's eyes widened. "They've reached here first," she whispered. Evan's stomach sank. He checked the radar again. Dozens of dots appeared around the station. Ships, small and fast, all bearing the same golden signature. "They've blocked the station," he muttered. "We're trapped." Lyra stood up, pacing the small cabin. "No, there's another way. If we go through the outer debris field, there's an old smuggler's port on the far side." "My father's scanners won't reach that deep," Evan frowned. "That's a suicide run. Too much junk, too much radiation." Lyra looked at him, her eyes fierce. "I've done worse," she said. Evan sighed. He had no choice. "All right, then we go through the storm." He pushed the thrusters, and the ship turned toward the field. A storm of broken metal and frozen rock surrounded them. Old shipwrecks drifted slowly in the blackness. Some still burned faintly, their engines flashing with dying sparks. Evan steered carefully, weaving between them. Pieces of metal scraped the hull. Every collision echoed like thunder. Lyra held onto the wall, her eyes fixed on the window. She whispered something under her breath, a short prayer in her native tongue. Then, from deep within the bag, the core began to hum again. The sound was soft at first, like a heartbeat, then it grew louder, deeper. Shaking the air, Evan glanced at her. "It's doing it again," he said. Lyra nodded slowly. "It senses danger." The light from the bag spilled across the cabin, filling it with a strange, calm glow. For a moment, everything around them slowed. The debris outside drifted like feathers. Frozen in time, Evan stared in awe. "It's controlling the gravity field," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "It's protecting us." They moved through the storm untouched. The glowing light surrounded the ship like a shield. The fragments of metal bounced away as if pushed by invisible hands. When they reached the far side, the light dimmed. The ship broke free into open space again. Evan let out a shaky breath. "I don't think I'll ever get used to that." Lyra smiled faintly. "Neither will I," but before they could rest, an alarm flashed red across the console. Evan's heart sank. The radar showed a single large object moving fast behind them. Not a fleet this time, and one ship, but enormous. It filled the radar like a shadow, blotting out light. Lyra's face turned pale. "It's him," she whispered. Evan didn't need to ask who. The deep voice that followed confirmed it. "Lyra," the comm system hissed, "my daughter. You cannot run from me forever." The ship behind them appeared in the window. A massive golden cruiser glowing like a star. Energy beams spread from its core, surrounding them like a net. Evan pulled the controls hard, but it was useless. They were caught. Lyra stood frozen, tears glinting in her eyes. "My father's ship. The Sovereign Blade," she said quietly. "He built it to conquer worlds." Evan gritted his teeth. "Well, I'm not planning to be one of them." The ship shook violently as a tractor beam pulled them in. Panels cracked, lights flickered, alarms screamed. Lyra fell to her knees, clutching the core. "Evan," she said, her voice trembling, "if he takes the core, everything will end. He'll use it to control all life. You have to destroy it." Evan stared at her in disbelief. "Destroy it? That thing just saved our lives." Lyra looked up, her eyes wet but fierce. "It doesn't belong to us if he connects with it. He'll become something no one can stop." The beam pulled them closer. Evan could see the docking bay opening, a golden gate swallowing them whole. He looked at the bag, then at Lyra. His mind raced. If he destroyed the core, she might die too. If he didn't, the galaxy might fall. He clenched his jaw. "I'll think of something," he said. Lyra shook her head. There's no time. Suddenly, the core began to glow brighter. The light filled the cockpit, turning everything white. Evan felt a surge of heat and energy through his body. Lyra screamed as the air cracked with sound. Then, silence when Evan opened his eyes. Everything was gone. No stars, no cruiser, no Lyra. Only the core floating in front of him, pulsing softly, and a voice echoed through the emptiness. You were chosen, it said. Now you must decide what kind of world will live. The silence stretched forever. Evan floated in the white void. Weightless and alone, no stars, no sound, only the faint hum of the glowing core before him. Its light pulsed like a living heart, each beat echoing through his chest. He looked around, his voice trembling. Lyra? He called. But there was no answer, only the soft whisper of light moving through endless space. The core shifted shape slowly, like liquid metal forming symbols in the air. Images appeared, planets, stars. Cities rising and falling. He saw wars, destruction, and people crying beneath burning skies. Then he saw Lyra standing before her father, her eyes filled with tears, a memory or maybe a vision. Her father's voice echoed around him, cold and proud. The strong rule because the weak cannot. Then the light changed again, showing another vision. Lyra holding the core, whispering softly, power means nothing without compassion. Evan closed his eyes, the voices blending together in his mind. He understood now. The core was showing him both paths, what power could do, and what mercy could create. He floated closer, feeling warmth spreading through him. The core spoke again, not in words, but in thought. You carry the heart of choice, it said. One must lead. One must fall. Evan felt the truth sink deep inside. The core was offering him control, a chance to rebuild or to destroy. He wasn't ready for that kind of power. He was just a mechanic, a man who fixed broken things. But maybe that was exactly why it had chosen him. The white void began to tremble. Shadows of gold and crimson appeared in the distance. The image of Lord Kale emerged. Tall, armored, his eyes blazing with fire, he reached toward the core, his voice booming through the space. My daughter's weakness ends here. Give me the core, human, and I will spare your life. Evan glared at him. You've already taken enough lives, he said. Kale's laughter shook the void. You think you can stop me? You're nothing. Evan clenched his fists. Maybe, but I'm still standing between you and the universe. The core pulsed brighter. Kale's image cracked and twisted, trying to fight its light. Lyra's voice broke through the noise, soft but strong. Evan, don't let him take it. Evan turned, and she was there, glowing faintly, like a spirit woven from starlight. Her expression was calm, her silver eyes filled with peace. The core connects all life, she said. It listens to the hearts of those who hold it. If you choose fear, it will destroy. If you choose hope, it will heal. Evan stared at her. Lyra, she smiled faintly. I'm part of it now, Evan. I gave myself to stop him from claiming it, but you can finish what I couldn't. Evan's heart ached. He didn't want to lose her, not after everything they'd survived. He reached for her, but his hand passed through light. I don't know if I'm strong enough, he whispered. Lyra shook her head. Strength isn't in power, Evan. It's in choice. Kale's voice roared again. The void darkened. Flames and lightning filled the sky. The core trembled, torn between light and shadow. Evan felt the heat burning through him. Pain exploded in his chest. Kale reached closer, his armor breaking through the light. Evan screamed, but then he remembered Lyra's words. He closed his eyes and whispered, I choose hope. The core exploded in light. Golden waves of energy spread across the void. Kale's figure shattered into dust, his roar fading into silence. Evan felt his body falling, his mind fading. The light wrapped around him like a warm blanket. The last thing he saw was Lyra smiling. You fixed something far greater than a ship, she said softly. Then everything went dark. When Evan opened his eyes again, he was lying on a rocky shore. The suns were rising above a quiet sea of silver water. His ship was wrecked nearby, smoke rising from its engines. He sat up slowly, clutching his chest. The core was gone. Only a faint blue crystal remained in his hand. Glowing weakly, he looked at it and whispered, Guess it's over. But deep down he knew it wasn't. He could feel something alive in that tiny light. A heartbeat, gentle and steady. He looked up at the horizon. The wind carried a familiar whisper. Thank you, Evan. He smiled softly. You're welcome, Lyra, he said. Then he stood, Staring into the rising sun, he was just a mechanic again. But somewhere beyond the stars, a new world was being born from his choice, and its first breath began with hope.